And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Thursday, December 26th, 2024. And this outlook is for as we head into the weekend, Friday and Saturday. So ice continues to grow across the far north along the Arctic and Chukchi Sea coast. We've seen where at least in the earlier season where we had open water down here, the lower Chukchi Sea, that is filled in. We've had some very cold temperatures now heading southward. Readings will be down around 0 on the north side there of St. Lawrence Island as we head for overnight lows. And there's Arctic air over Siberia that's going to seep eastward and overspread, especially the northern central mainland, but the bulk of it will be riding along the Brooks Range, North Slope, and Arctic coast as we go through this weekend. There have been some polynyas that have opened up because of that stronger northeast-north flow, at least earlier in the week. And we find that ice development continues farther south and has redeveloped further west of the mainland. Now coming down into Kuskokwim Bay, still waiting on some development in Bristol Bay, but with still some rather brisk northerly winds, the ice movement has been a little southward. One thing, though, winds will not be quite as strong coming up here as we head into the day Friday as they have been earlier in the week. So what's going on late tonight into early Friday morning? We have one low pressure that's south of the Alaska Peninsula. That's kept a north-northwest flow of air across, especially the eastern Aleutians, to be a bit stronger with some gale force winds still there and some snow showers. There are winter weather advisories for the eastern Aleutians this Thursday evening through noon Friday. And we will have another round of some rain moving up into the Panhandle, get some snow as you get up in the mountains. But this next wave of low pressure will rotate through on Friday. And this stationary front across the mainland divides the Arctic air from more seasonably cold air. Again, that Arctic air is just going to be seeping eastward as we go through the weekend. And on Friday afternoon, we find low pressure over the southwestern Gulf, another low down southwest of there. There's another low. This one's heading northward as well. Will bring additional precipitation to the Panhandle. If we look further west, though, there's going to be a stronger low come up out of the North Pacific and impact the eastern Aleutians Saturday evening into Sunday morning with some stronger gale to low-end storm force winds. Meanwhile, Arctic high pressure building into the North Slope. This front is sagging southward a bit more. Overall, we're going to see temperatures cool even down across southern areas of the state, but the really cold sub-zero temperatures will slide southward along the west and north side of the Alaska Range through the weekend. Looking at Friday's marine weather for the Panhandle, southeast to south winds as high as 20 knots. Stevens Passage down through Dixon Entrance. Waves 2 feet, Lynn Canal, 4 feet, Stevens Passage, maybe 8 to 10, 11 feet there. Ketchikan, Metlakatla, and then back out to the west. Look for southeast to east winds around 20 knots. There could be some gusts to 35 knots outside of Port Alexander and south of Sitka. Waves generally running 13 to 16 feet. Saturday, offshore northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Gusts there within Lynn Canal with 4-foot waves, 3-foot waves, Stevens Passage, 6-7-foot waves there down toward Dixon Entrance, and then generally easterly winds 15 to 20 knots for the nearshore waters of the Gulf Coast, and waves running anywhere 9 to 11 feet. Winds will also come down across the northwestern Gulf, Cook Inlet, within Prince William Sound. Look for easterly to southeasterly winds, Prince William Sound, and outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance around 15 knots. 2-foot waves, Prince William Sound. Length of the Cook Inlet, winds will be northeast to north, 10 to 15 knots with waves of 2 to 3 feet on Friday. And then for Saturday, look for northeast winds, Prince William Sound, 10 knots, 2-foot waves. Winds variable to northeasterly, 10 to 15 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. And again, going down the length of the Alaska, or down along the Cook Inlet, we're looking at northeast winds, upper Cook Inlet, just 10 knots, but north winds, 15 knots there off of Anchor Point, increasing to 25 knots toward the entrance there of Cook Inlet with waves 6 to 7 feet. For Friday, this includes Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, winds generally northerly across the region, 15 knots around Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, As we trail out, though, toward Cold Bay Falls past those winds upwards of 25 knots from the north, and waves generally 5-6 feet on the North Pacific side, 3 to 6 and maybe as high as 9 feet there outside of Cold Bay. And for Saturday, look for northwest winds around Kodiak Island at 20 knots, waves 5 feet Shelikof Strait, 6 feet there on the east side of the island, and then coming down along the Alaska Peninsula, winds will try to turn back more toward the northeast and east at about 20 knots, with waves running 3 to 5 feet on the North Pacific side and 3 to 5 feet on the Bering side. For the Aleutians on Friday, still northerly winds upwards of 30 knots. They're far eastern Aleutians, Dutch Harbor on Alaska. As we go back to the west, winds flip around to the southeast at 35 to 30 knots. And this is in advance of a couple areas of low pressure that are going to be coming up into the southwest Bering. That's not the low that's going to be coming up from the North Pacific. And you start to see that Saturday. So a stronger low coming up out of the North Pacific will impact the eastern Aleutians, the eastern areas they're seeing into the central Aleutians. Southeast winds 35 to 40 knot gales on Saturday. Stronger winds coming for Saturday night into early Sunday morning. So keep that in mind. There could be some sort of warnings put out for that. But back to the west, winds are southwest to south around 25 to 30 knots through the western Aleutians. Along the southwest coast, winds will be generally northerly, 15 knots within Norton Sound and along the upper part of the Yukon Delta. And then as we drop on down Toland Strait, out of Kuskokwim Bay could be as high as 20-25 knots. And we have north winds to 25 knots there in the Pribilofs. For Saturday, with the colder sub-zero air settling down in, pushing from the north into the lower middle Yukon Valley, that's going to help turn winds more offshore. So we're looking at offshore northeast winds out of Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay at 20 knots. And then as we round up through the Yukon coast and into Norton Sound, look for easterly winds of 15 to 20 knots. With stronger winds out toward Pribilov, southeast to 30 knots, and then 40 knot easterly gales in the vicinity of St. Matthew. Finally, in the north, through the Bering Strait, winds will generally be out of the northwest to north around 20 knots. Plenty of ice in place. As we come up along the Chukchi Sea coast, winds will be north-northwest 10 to 15 knots. And then along the Beaufort Sea coast, winds will be 20 knots, Prudhoe Bay, but pick up to 30 knots in the vicinity of Kaktovik. There could be some blowing snow around Point Thompson and Kaktovik as a result of those brisk westerly winds on Friday. And then again, for Saturday, winds come down along the Beaufort Sea coast, Utqiagvik through Kaktovik, west winds 10 knots. As we drop down along the Chukchi Sea coast, northeast winds 15 knots off of Wainwright, Cape Lisburne. And then those winds turn back southeasterly out of Kotzebue Sound through the lower portion of the Chukchi Sea at 15 knots. And then along the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Wales down to Nome, look for southeast winds 20 knots. And southerly winds there across St. Lawrence Island at 20 knots as well. And again, we have that ice in place, but keep in mind too, we're going to have colder temperatures that, especially even down around the Seward Peninsula and certainly all along the northwest Arctic coast and Beaufort Sea coast, we're going to have sub-zero readings. Some of the interior areas here could be as cold as 30 below for this weekend as that Siberian Arctic air just kind of seeps across the northern half of the mainland.